When Wii Sports was released about 16 years ago, it took the world by storm, creating this phenomenon across the industry. Players of all ages suddenly were playing the same thing, and for many, especially grandparents, this had been the first game they'd played in years. It was accessible and fun, and immediately showed players the fun of motion controls. Nintendo Switch Sports looks to capitalize on that popularity, bringing the experience to the hybrid console while also adding in some new games in the process. At its core, Nintendo Switch Sports is very much Wii Sports for Nintendo Switch, albeit with a few changes, both good and bad. Perhaps the biggest change is in the controls. Wii Sports used the basic Wii Remote, while its sequel, Wii Sports Resort, used the Wii Motion Plus accessory. Nintendo Switch Sports, on the other hand, uses the Joy-Con, a controller with a much more accurate and advanced gyroscope system compared to the prior controls on the Wii. This allows for more finite movement in games like tennis, where a twist in the wrist while swinging can completely change the way the ball is hit. It's much improved from the original without losing any of the approachableness that the first game was famous for. At launch, there's a total of 6 sports: badminton, tennis, volleyball, bowling, and chambara. A 7th sport, golf, was announced to be coming later this year, and based on the teasers, it looks like it's an improved version of what we had in Wii Sports. Unfortunately, fan favorites baseball and boxing are missing in action, and they certainly leave a hole in your heart after spending a week with Switch Sports. With that said, what is here is admirable, capturing some of the old and introducing some new. My favorites were chambara, tennis, and bowling. Chambara feels like a replacement for boxing in this game. It feels like a modified version of the sword play in Wii Sports Resort. 2 players battle it out in a ring with either a sword, charged sword, or twin swords. The goal is to knock the other player out while keeping yourself safe. A single sword offers a basic block and attack system. Charged swords have power levels that increase with every successful block, while the twin swords have you blocking and attacking at the same time. It's an intricate system with a fun layer of strategy that consistently got me coming back for more battles. I thoroughly enjoyed playing online and trying to read my opponent's moves like a more physical form of chess. Bowling is, well, bowling. It's very similar to Wii Sports' counterpart. You press down on a button, swing your arm back as if you were throwing a bowling ball. The major update with this version is Simultaneous Mode, allowing everyone to play at the same time. It sounds like a small change, but in person it adds a lot more excitement to seeing the reaction of all your friends in a live time setting as opposed to taking turns. Tennis is the most unchanged sport, where it's the exact same controls, rule set, and movement. I'm not complaining though. Tennis on the Wii Sports was awesome, and it continues to be one of my favorites in the Switch Sports, but with a much more improved look. Badminton feels like a pretty solid spin on tennis that offers more precise shots for a faster back and forth game. If you get in a longer match, it can definitely be a workout with all the fast swinging. Volleyball has the biggest barrier of entry, as it ditches the pick up and play approach. You have to learn movements like volleying, spikes, and so on. Sadly, it doesn't feel as second nature to know the movements as opposed to something like swinging your arms in tennis, so it does take some time to learn if you're in a group. It also is a game that will split the view into 4 screens if you have a full party locally, making it challenging to see the action and the correct movement you're supposed to do. When it works, but it does take some time to get there under the right circumstances. Lastly, there's soccer. It's one of the strangest sports in the collection. You use 2 Joy-Con to control movement through the analog sticks, pressing the buttons for sprints and jumps, and lastly swinging the control in the direction you want to kick. It works, but it does take a bit to get used to. Like volleyball, when you get the hang of it, it starts to feel better, but it takes some work, and it feels like it goes against what made Wii Sports so iconic as a result. A subcategory of soccer is the Shootout Mode. This mode uses the ring fit leg strap to tie the Joy-Con to your leg, and if you buy the physical copy of this game, it'll come with one too. This mode is simply a kick the ball into the net game. It doesn't feel clever nor fun, more like a last minute addition. Nintendo has clarified its plans to add the strap to the regular soccer mode, but only time will tell how that really works out or turns out. While playing these games both locally and online, you'll earn points toward a loot box system of sorts. These loot boxes unlock new customizable accessories and clothing for your characters. Customizing your character is fun, but I have no idea why Nintendo went with the loot box system. You can argue it elongates the playtime if you're after one specific item and you have to keep playing to get it, but it just also makes the game feel repetitive. I feel like it was a bad choice. I remember part of the fun of Wii Sports was also having your friends' Miis play with you, and the fact of the matter is that the Switch makes it a bit difficult to have multiple Miis on one system, or even just sharing your Mii with a friend. That seems like a more system level issue that I hope can get added in the future to support titles like this and Miitopia, for example. I'm happy that the online multiplayer so far has been a great experience. I haven't had any disconnection moments or noticeable slowdown, and it gives me a bit of hope to see more online features be integrated into this game in the future. When compared to other Wii Sports like entries, Nintendo Switch Sports has the highest production value in terms of visuals and presentation. While you can still import your Miis to base your characters on, the models here look much more human-like as opposed to the Higglytown Hero looking characters in Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. The design of the environment looks much more like a cross between a sports club and a resort, as opposed to the more traditional layouts in Wii Sports. It's a charming look that looks quite lively in action. I do wish that the characters had a bit more customizable features to make them feel like my own characters, as opposed to a kid that vaguely looks like me. Face options, for example, feel particularly limited. In terms of performance, Nintendo Switch Sports runs moderately well, although I was a bit surprised by the resolution metrics. Switch Sports runs at 900p in dock mode and a dynamic 720p to 540p in handheld mode. In regards to frame rate, the game runs at a solid 60 frames per second. While the game looks good, I was surprised to see this not maxed out at 1080p. It doesn't seem particularly taxing for the Switch, and considering that you have up to 4-player split screen, the added pixels would greatly help. If you plan on playing with friends, that 4-player split screen for some games does get a bit hard to see, so I'd recommend keeping it to at least 2-player local or online. When it comes to music, it's fine. I didn't really resonate with any of the tracks as much as I did the original songs in Wii Sports, but to be fair, that was a pretty high bar. I do like that they incorporated the motifs of Wii Sports music in this though. Hearing the main theme just had that almost snapped my neck from how iconic it is. I felt like Mark from Moon Knight took over my body. In terms of sound design, I think Nintendo did a great job at adding in the intricate sounds you'd hear in a sports club. For example, the sound of my tennis racket hitting the ball, the subtle crowd sounds in the background, the atmosphere, to even the sounds of my shoes squeaking on the court. It beautifully captures the ambience of the setting and just makes it feel much more immersive. Nintendo Switch Sports is a pretty good attempt at bringing the Wii Sports experience to Nintendo Switch with updated visuals, new games, and improved controls thanks to the Joy-Con. Most of the games are pretty good with the exception of Volleyball, which seems a bit awkward. You definitely can feel the missing presence of fan favorite games like boxing and baseball, and they still might be added at some point in the future as Nintendo has already laid out plans to add golf in the near future. Customization features are alright, but can be better, but at least we got some pretty solid online multiplayer. Overall, I don't think Switch Sports is the next big Wii Sports craze, at least not yet, but it adds great content to the original as much as it does take it away. While it's a good game as it is now, it can be an amazing game with some content updates and patches.